The end of another year leads us to another list such as this one. These are always bittersweet lists for us because, by their very nature, anyone who is on this list we have sadly lost. But one thing I want to make very clear before I begin is that unlike most Trek Culture or What Culture videos, this is not a ranking video because one name is not in any way more or less important than any other name on this list. We have tried to just give as much detail about these incredible people as possible. Another thing I'd like to point out as well is that while on this list we have focused just on actors who have passed away in 2022, that is not in any way to say that there haven't been more wonderful people that we've lost who might have worked behind the scenes. And with that, I would just like to take a moment to address some of those names. Harold Livingston, Douglas Trumbull, Neil Adams, Marvin Chomsky, James Bana, George Perez, Gregory Jean, Leon Harris, Dorothy Duder, Mike Reynolds, Tony Dow, Jean LaBelle, Wayne Grace, Amanda Mackie Johnson, Gabrielle Beaumont, Fabio Passaro, Greg Bear, and Terence O'Hara. Their contributions are no less important to what we know as Star Trek as a whole, and I just wanted to make sure that we recognize them here in this intro. Now, with that in mind, let us take a look through the amazing lives of these Star Trek actors who died in 2022. Number 34, Nichelle Nichols. I mean, what is there left to say about this incredible human being that hasn't already been said? And in fact, here on Trek Culture, we have already spoken about her incredible contributions to Star Trek itself. So actually, we're going to talk about some of the things she did outside of Star Trek now as well. Grace Dell Nichols has had one of the biggest contributions to humanity of anyone who's ever graced our television sets. In 1977, she became involved with NASA and she spearheaded a campaign to get more people of color, women, minorities in fact, involved in the space program. Her involvement with this is well documented in the documentary Woman in Motion, but it was clearly her passion, and in so many interviews and so many exposés, she spoke about her pride at having been a part of this. In addition to attending the christening of the Space Shuttle Enterprise, she took part in an 8-hour high-altitude mission to study the atmospheres of Mars and Saturn. She was an incredibly talented singer and performer, and she is sadly missed. But as I say, what an incredible legacy that Uhura has left behind her. 34, Maggie Threat. We had already written and recorded this list when the news came through of Threat's passing, and we wanted to make sure that she was included. Maggie Threat was born Diane Pine, and she would appear as Ruth Bonaventure, one of the 3 women that Harry Mudd was transporting as wives to the lithium miners in the original series episode, Mudd's Women. She would appear in many films and television shows, but she particularly remembered her time on this episode. She recalled William Shatner was very welcoming and very polite, and she really enjoyed her time filming with DeForest Kelley. Though for the most part she didn't know anybody else on set, through a happy coincidence, Roger C. Carmel, who played Harry Mudd, was actually her downstairs neighbour at the time. So they already knew each other, and therefore they had a bit of a working relationship already. She recalled that there was some fairly arduous makeup processes that she had to endure, particularly as her character's Venus drug begins to wear off. There was one day where she said the call time was 4 a.m. and between application of makeup, filming and removal, she was on set straight through until 10 p.m. She said that she had been caked in duo surgical paste and that when it was removed, it left her feeling raw. She spent so much time on set that day that she did in fact eke into triple pay, something the producers were not happy about, and she had to fight to get paid what she had earned. Years later, she would recall that Gene Roddenberry sent her a letter asking her to forfeit her residuals and donate them to his charity. She declined. She didn't particularly enjoy the film and TV business. She was consistently cast in Mexican or Native American roles, primarily due to her long brown hair, something that she refused to cut. But as time went on, she decided to step away from acting. She found great success in her music career, particularly with her singles Soupy and Walk On By. Maggie Threat passed away on December the 18th, 2002. She was 76 years of age. Number 33, Gregory Eisen. Gregory Eisen actually has quite a long history with Star Trek. He was first cast in the season 1 episode of The Next Generation, The Big Goodbye, but as chance would have it, he wasn't able to take on the role, something he later said he really regretted. Now, he would go on to appear on Deep Space Nine, Voyager and Enterprise, and would eventually rise to the rank of Admiral in a version of Starfleet, even if he had to move to the Terran universe to do it. He had a long career in television and stage acting, and he was in several highly acclaimed films like Airplane and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. He's probably best known for his Emmy-nominated role in 24, where he played Vice President and then later President Charles Logan. He was a main player for a while before he took a step back, returning as a guest actor. Eisen suffered a major heart attack in 2015, but this didn't actually stop him from working. He would later pass away this year due to complications from major surgery. He was 74 years old when he died. Number 32, Valora Nolan. Valora Nolan was born in 1941 under the name Valor Baum. Now, she was born the day after Pearl Harbor, and her mother actually gave her the name Valor from the speech given by Winston Churchill. She would take the name Valora Nolan when she became an actor, having moved to America. Though she appeared in several films and TV series, she appeared in the episode of Star Trek Patterns of Force where she played the character Darius. Now, she was also a skilled equestrian, and she wrote 2 books, one called Horse Stories and one which was a collection of poetry. She retired from acting quite early and went on to be a successful photographer, working under the name Valora Tree. Her IMDb lists that Star Trek actually contributed to her decision to leave acting. When she was given the role, she was not told that she would be wearing Nazi iconography as part of her character. Her family had actually fled Nazi Germany. She was deeply uncomfortable that she had to wear these on set as part of the role. She was then unfortunately told she had to do it, but she did say afterwards that had she known in advance, she would have turned down the role. She lived for many years in Sebastopol in California. When she passed away, she was 80 years old. Number 31, Kirk Bailey. Kirk Bailey played Magnus Hansen, Seven of Nine's real father, in the episode Dark Frontier of Star Trek Voyager. He would probably be best known, though, for his role in the Nickelodeon sitcom Salute Your Shorts, as the role of camp counselor Kevin Ugg Lee. He remained very good friends with his co-stars from that show for years after it wrapped. He actually went on to be a groomsman for one of his co-stars, Danny Kuski, in 1998. His co-stars would remember him as one of those actors who just dived straight into everything, never let anything get in the way, and was always bringing so much energy to set. And in fact, this had a little bit of an unpleasant outcome for him, because one day on set, he in character had to dive into a pool of water, which he did so hard that he ruptured his left eardrum, which left him permanently deaf in that ear for the rest of his life. Bailey was unfortunately 59 years old when he died. He'd been diagnosed with lung cancer only 6 months before, and he is survived by his partner and 2 children. Number 30, Ralph Moorer. Ralph Moorer appeared in Star Trek, first as the character Bilar in The Return of the Archons, and then as one of the Ecosian SS guards, again in the episode Patterns of Force. He would eventually change his name to Lev Mailer, which is how I'm going to refer to him for the rest of this entry. Mailer would actually identify himself as a little bit of a problem child early on in life. He would always be getting into trouble, and they could have gotten quite serious, but it managed to stop with just basically his schooling being affected before he got into any serious trouble, because at that point one of his friends managed to get him a guest spot on The Lucy Show. The Lucy Show, of course, featuring Lucille Ball, who is, of course, the grandmother of Star Trek. Mailer would step away from acting in the early 2000s and he would move into teaching, which he would do for some years to come. He would pass away at the good old age of 88, having been hospitalized earlier that month for a bacterial infection. Number 29, Mitchell Ryan. Mitchell Ryan will of course be best known to Trekkies as Kyle Riker, father of William T. He appeared in the second season episode of The Next Generation, The Icarus Factor. Earlier on in his career, he was actually cast in one of the lead roles in the drama kind of horror series Dark Shadows, but he actually ended up getting fired from that role because his alcoholism was taking over his life. He would later say in interviews that he barely remembered anything about filming because he was just drunk all of the time. Thankfully, he was able to overcome this, and he would go on to act in such things as The A-Team, as Hot Shots Part 2, Lethal Weapon, and of course, Halloween 6: The Curse of Michael Myers. Now actually, there's a bit of a funny moment from that. He played Dr. Wynn, who was the head of the Cult of Thorn. Don't worry about it. This led to an unscripted moment that had a bit of a greater significance than anyone thought of at the time. In the scene, Ryan and his other followers were to be wearing these big ceremonial robes. Bob Weinstein, who was producing the film, rang director Joe Chappelle and basically screamed down the phone at him. He was heard by the entire cast and crew to be screaming, "The robes have got to go, the robes have got to go, they look stupid." This led to an unscripted moment where Ryan says the words, okay, you can take off that robe now that Halloween is over." The next movie would be a reboot. Ryan died at age 88 in LA from congestive heart failure. Number 28, Catherine Hayes. Catherine Hayes played the character Jem in the episode of the original series, The Empath. That episode became infamous because of its incredibly dark tone. Her character Jem can absorb other people's pain by taking their injuries onto her own person. When the episode went to the censorship board, they said they couldn't pick any one moment that was the issue. It was just the overall feeling of basically dread that they had a problem with. She made many guest appearances in her early career, something she would later say she was grateful for. At that time in Hollywood, a lot of the guest appearances would go to women, which she said were roles that would have a little bit of meat to them. For years, she worked on the soap opera As the World Turns. In fact, she worked on it from 1972 right up until 2010, with her character becoming this pivotal heroine for the entire show. In her later years, Hayes would suffer from dementia. This was confirmed by her daughter, Sherry Mancuski, in an interview that was given after her mother's death. But Mancuski would describe her so wonderfully. She would say that no matter how confused her mother would ever get with day-to-day tasks, she was always ready for an interview, full face of makeup on and good to go. Because as Mancuski described her, she was a professional from her very first day to her very last day. Hayes passed away at 87 years of age. Number 27, Estelle Harris. Estelle Harris appeared in the Star Trek Voyager episode Sacred Ground, where she is in fact only credited as Old Woman. She was a lifelong comedienne who would probably be best known for her role in Seinfeld as the mother of George Costanza. She dubbed herself the Queen of Commercials because in her career there were years where she was booking up to 25 commercials a year. Between you and me, that's a lot. To a certain generation, her voice might be a little bit more recognizable. Now, while it was deliberately over the top and shrill, she managed to channel that to play Mrs. Potato Head in Toy Stories 2, 3, and 4. In fact, she came out of retirement to do her lines for Toy Story 4. In 1952, she met her husband, Cy Harris, and they would stay together until his death in 2021, which is an incredible run. They had 3 sons together, 3 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. Harris passed away in her home from natural causes at the age of 93. Number 26, Nehemiah Pursov. Nehemiah Pursov is one of those actors who just has had such an amazing career that it would literally be impossible to list all of his credits in this video alone. Now in Star Trek, you would know him from the episode The Most Toys in Star Trek The Next Generation. You know the one. He's the alien with the bits of metal sticking out of his face. It's an image so iconic that it got reused recently in Star Trek Lower Decks. Pursov got his start in Hollywood in the 1940s. He would start by playing sort of ruffian gangster type characters. In fact, he appeared in Some Like It Hot, playing a gangster. He would also appear in the iconic I Could Have Been a Contender scene with Marlon Brando in On the Waterfront. Now, as the years went on, he wanted to kind of get away from that image, and he moved to playing kindlier old men. To a certain generation, his voice would be very well known as Papa Mouskowitz from the American Tail cartoon series. I mean, Fievel Goes West was one of my favourite films when I was a kid, so yes, I do know this man's voice very, very well. He would make a career change as well, moving away from acting and into painting. He was in fact a very, very talented painter. He married his wife Thea in 1951, and they would remain together until 2021 when she predeceased him by 1 year. 70 years. It's just incredible. He passed away at the age of 102. At the time, he was the oldest living male actor in Star Trek. Number 25. Gary Bullock. Gary Bullock appeared twice in Star Trek. First, he appeared in the Star Trek Voyager episode Rise as the character Goth. He would later appear in the Star Trek Enterprise episode The Expanse, where he played a Klingon counselor. Bullock was raised by his father on film, who was a massive film fan, and in fact named Bullock after his favourite actor, Gary Cooper. He was a big sci-fi fan. Bullock would go on to appear in such films as Species, RoboCops 2 and 3, though he might be best known for his villainous role in Twin Peaks' Fire Walk With Me. Bullock was also an author. His novel Elsewhen was released in 2014, and it chronicles a love that spans between universes. He met his wife Mill while performing a stage adaptation of The Crucible. They would go on to record many audiobooks together, with Mill playing most of the characters in the Charles Dickens novels. He would also narrate the World War II documentary The 325th Fighter Group of World War II by Neil Pugh. Bullock was 80 years old when he died. Number 24, David Byrne. David Byrne played Leeton, the Romulan commander in the Deep Space Nine episode Tears of the Prophets. He would also play a prophet version of Leeton as well in that episode. Now, while this was his only episode of Star Trek that he appeared in, he had a huge body of work behind him. Byrne was an accomplished academic with a BA in English Literature and an MA in Theatre Arts Acting and Directing. He was also awarded an honorary PhD by Southern Utah University. He recorded several audiobooks, and he managed to cross the Star Trek Star Wars divide by performing the role of Anakin Skywalker in a radio adaptation of Return of the Jedi. He served on the large theatre panel for the National Endowment of the Arts, and he was a board member for the Foundation of Biomedical Research. He supported many theatre initiatives, and he served as a co-chair on the American Diabetes Association for 5 years. In 2017, it was revealed that he'd been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. He died at his home in Santa Monica 4 days after his 83rd birthday. Number 23, David Warner. David Warner will be instantly recognizable to Star Trek fans for one of his 3 roles that he played in Star Trek. He first appeared in Star Trek V as the Terran ambassador to Nimbus 3, St. John Talbot. He then returned in Star Trek VI, playing the Klingon Chancellor Gorkon. He would then return again in Star Trek The Next Generation as Gul Madred, the sadistic Cardassian who tortures Captain Picard in the episode's Chain of Command. David Warner got his start at the Royal Shakespeare Company, which of course produced Sir Patrick Stewart as well. He appeared in dozens and dozens of stage and film and television, kind of oscillating between villainous and sympathetic roles. He would also appear in horror films such as The Omen, for example. Warner would also cross the Star Trek Doctor Who divide by appearing in the 7th season of the revival of Doctor Who. We will also be addressing his long history with Doctor Who on our Doctor Who edition of this list for the end of the year as well. But for here, suffice to say that Warner's work was so long and varied that he has left an incredible legacy behind him. He was diagnosed with cancer 18 months before he died, a fact he chose not to make public. He was 80 years old when he passed away. Number 22, Michael G. Hagerty. Michael G. Hagerty might be best known to some people looking at this list as Mr. Trigger, the janitor of the building where all of our favourite friends lived in. He learned to dance ballet with Joey, in fact. He did appear in Star Trek 2 times. First, he appeared in Redemption Part 2 as Captain Larg. He would then return in the 7th season episode Thine Own Self as Scorran. It was this role that gave him a lot more to do and endeared him more toward audiences, even if he was trying to kill Data. But I mean, at this stage, who hasn't tried to kill that android? Hagerty got his start in acting. He was actually invited to take part in an improv group by Jim Belushi. He would go on to write and star in 3 of their shows throughout the 80s. He was well known for his mustache and his voice. It is almost impossible that you don't know what this man's voice sounds like. He was an Irish Catholic by birth, and he proposed to his wife in Ireland on New Year's Eve. He was still working at the time of his death, having a recurring role on the show Somebody Somewhere. At the age of 67, he suffered a seizure which had been caused by an adverse reaction to medication he was taking for a leg injury, and he passed away. Number 21, Pamela Kosh. Star Trek fans will of course recognise Pamela Kosh straight away from her starring role as Titania, Queen of the Fairies, in the San Francisco Amateur Shakespeare Society's production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. I mean, they might also recognise her as Mrs. Carmichael, the Irish landlady of the building where the bridge crew of the Enterprise D escaped to after going through the rift on Davidia 3. Up to you, really. She might also be most recognisable as Jessel, the long-suffering housekeeper of Professor Data in All Good Things. Outside of Star Trek, she might be better known for her role as Mrs. Simpson on Saved by the Bell, or Lavinia Beach in Days of Our Lives. One thing that was absolutely universal in all of the roles was the enthusiasm that she brought to the part each time. She was born in the UK, but she became a US citizen in 1968. She and her husband constructed and then managed the Grand Mile Playhouse in California between 1973 and 1981. A case of mistaken identity would see her pronounced dead in 2020, but actually it was just because another person with the same name had in fact died. So you could say she bounced back quite nicely. She passed away peacefully this year at the age of 93. Number 20, Kenneth Welsh. Kenneth Welsh had a long history in film and television before he appeared in Star Trek Discovery's 3rd season as Senna Tal, the earlier host of the Tal symbiont. He started working in 1964 and continued acting right through until 2022. To some audiences, he might be best known for his role as the villainous Wyndham Earl in the 2nd season of Twin Peaks. He appeared in action films, drama, romance and disaster movies. He played the Vice President in The Day After Tomorrow and the Sheriff in Legends of the Fall. He received many nominations for Genie Awards between the years of 1980 and 2012, at which point they were replaced by the Canadian Film Awards. These are awarded to outstanding figures in Canadian film and television. Recently, he appeared as the narrator in the irreverent horror comedy PG Psycho Gorman, which is just the strangest film, and I really recommend that you watch it if you're of age, because it's just very silly and I really enjoyed it myself. Welsh died at the age of 80, with his son confirming the news via Twitter. His ashes were scattered over Lake Ontario. Number 19, Jack Kaler. Jack Kaler appeared in the 1st season episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Babel. He played Captain Jahil, the freighter captain who wanted to get the heck out of Dodge when the aphasia virus was ripping through Deep Space Nine. While that would be Kaler's only appearance in Star Trek, he had a long history in film as well. He appeared in Lethal Weapon, he appeared in Waterworld, he appeared in The Man in the High Castle recently, and also appeared in the iconic Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me. His big break came in the film Space Invaders, though he would probably be well known for his role in The Big Lebowski. He produced a one-man stage show as well. Kaler died from complications arising from leukemia. He was 75 years old. Number 18, Kirsty Alley. Kirsty Alley originated the role of Lieutenant Saavik in 1982's Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. There was always plans to potentially bring her back in Star Trek III and then again in Star Trek VI, which for various reasons never came to be, so this would be her only appearance in Star Trek. However, I think it's safe to say that Alley's star continued to rise throughout the 80s and 90s. Her appearances in Cheers, probably what she's most well known for, and also in the Look Who's Talking film series and her sitcom Veronica's Closet in the 90s. Alley was no stranger to controversy, and her outspoken support of former President Donald Trump did raise a few eyebrows throughout the years, as well as some statements regarding LGBTQIA+ people. She made her first appearance at a Star Trek convention in 2016, celebrating the franchise's 50th anniversary. She was 71 years old when she died following a short battle with cancer. Number 17, Walter Suhu. Walter Suhu appeared in a few episodes of Star Trek's original series. He first appeared as a technician walking through the hallways in The Man Trap. It's actually quite funny. If you watch the episode again now, he's just going for a stroll. You would like to think he's heading somewhere very important. He would later return in the episode The Devil in the Dark, where he would be trying to stay the heck out of the way of the Horta. He would then return finally in the episode The Omega Glory as one of the Comb Guards. Now, unfortunately, the one thing that is common to all three roles is that they were unspeaking, so that we never actually got to hear Suhu speak on a Star Trek episode. He would go on and act in many roles after this, before he would open Chinatown's Hop Louie restaurant in 1985. His last acting credit came in 2007 when he appeared alongside Jim Carrey and Virginia Madsen in the film The Number 23. He died at the age of 80, leaving behind his wife Eileen, to whom he'd been married for 70 years. Number 16, John Aniston. John Aniston had a long and distinguished career in film, television and theatre. He was born Yanis Anastasakis on the Greek island of Crete, but he moved to the US when he was only 2 years old. He would then go on to appear in literally thousands of episodes of television, working right up until his death. He appeared in the Star Trek Voyager episode Workforce, playing the Quarren ambassador. He would probably be best known for his role in Days of Our Lives, in which he appeared from 1985 until his death in 2022. He was the father of Jennifer Aniston and would appear in such shows as The West Wing, Gilmore Girls and Mad Men. He was 89 years old when he died. Number 15, Tim McCormick. Tim McCormick would appear in dozens of episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, often as a non-speaking extra role, and one time a dead body, which was a bit cool. He was also the main stunt double for Brent Spiner, meaning, he also played Data, which is not a bad name to have on the resume. Now, he might be better known for his roles on The Colbys or Miami Vice, but there's dozens of appearances between them. He passed away quite unexpectedly at the age of 74 this year, and was remembered fondly by many of the cast and crew of Star Trek The Next Generation. Number 14, Mary Mara. Mary Mara was almost unrecognisable under all the makeup as one of the sphere builders in Star Trek Enterprise's 3rd season. For me, I would know her best from her role as Loretta Sweet, the sex worker with a heart of gold in some of the earlier seasons of ER. Her son, funnily enough, in that show was played by none other than Jake Lloyd, who would go on to play Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars The Phantom Menace. She'd be well known for her role as Inspector Bryn Carson on the show Nash Bridges, and she would also perform on the soundtrack in an episode of Criminal Minds as well. Mara retired from acting in 2020 and split her time between the two coasts in the US. Sadly, this year, she drowned while swimming in the St. Lawrence River. She was 61 years old. Number 13, Wayne Grace. Wayne Grace had a long career behind him, appearing in so many episodes of television, film and stage productions. He seemed to like Klingons a lot. He appeared as Governor Turak in The Next Generation and as Fleet Commander Krell in Star Trek Enterprise. He also appeared in the games Star Trek The Next Generation Final Unity, Star Trek Starfleet Command and Star Trek Klingon Academy. Just for a change of pace, he played a Cardassian legate in the Deep Space Nine episode Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night. In film, he would appear in Robert Altman's McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and would also appear in Dances with Wolves, Volcano, and Mulholland Drive. On television, he would appear in The Lazarus Man and The X-Files. He died in Venice Beach, California at 82 years of age. Number 12, Andrew Prine. Andrew Prine may best be described as a career actor. He started working in the 1950s and worked more or less steadily right up until the 2000s. He would get started in theatre before he moved to the small screen. He would appear in many shows in the 60s, including Gunsmoke, Wagon Train and Bonanza. He would appear in 2 episodes of Star Trek. First, he appeared in the Next Generation 6th season episode Frame of Mind, where he played Suna. He would then return in Star Trek Deep Space Nine in the episode Life Support, where he played the Cardassian legate, Terrell. Prine died of natural causes at the age of 86. Number 11. Marsha Hunt. Marsha Hunt was quite frankly Hollywood royalty long before she ever appeared in the Next Generation first season episode Too Short a Season as Ann Jameson. In fact, she had such a long and varied career that her role in 1988 in Star Trek was seen as one of her retirement roles. She began working in Hollywood at age 17 when she was quickly snapped up for a 7-year deal with Paramount Studios. When this ended, she then went to work with MGM Studios. It was during this period of her career that she auditioned for and was told she had won the part of, by David O. Selznick, Melanie Hamilton in Gone with the Wind. Now she was asked to keep that little bit of information to herself, which she did. And then 3 days later, Olivia de Havilland was confirmed to have won the part. After this time, she would become entangled with the House Un-American Activities Committee, in which she was blacklisted for several years in Hollywood for having joined such other performers as Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall in protesting Senator Joseph McCarthy's draconian approach into investigations of communism in Hollywood. She was a vocal supporter for humanitarian rights and was also at the time a supporter of such other blacklisted people as Dalton Trumbo. While she would remain blacklisted from film for quite a while, she would find success in television throughout the years, acting all the way up to 1988, in which she retired. Then she would make a couple of guest spots in 2006 in a couple of short films. She died this year in Sherman Oaks, which she was the honorary mayor of at the age of 104. At the time of her death, she was the oldest living Star Trek performer. Number 10. Paul Sorvino. Paul Sorvino might be well known to some people from his role in Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas. However, to Trekkies, he's always going to be Nikolai Roshenko, adopted brother of Worf, who appeared in the 7th season episode of The Next Generation, Homeward. He would probably be very well known for his various roles as gangsters and mob-type figures, but this actually was a stereotype he wanted to get away from. He would play authoritarian roles such as cops and sheriffs. In fact, he appeared in the 2nd season of Law and Order for a run of episodes in which he played the chief of police, but he then stepped away from this part because he was worried it was actually damaging his voice because he was a talented opera singer. He was a sculptor as well, mainly working in bronze, but was also a painter, a writer. He's one of those performers where, you name it, he's probably done it. On top of this, he was a deputized sheriff in real life in Pennsylvania. One of Sorvino's daughters is, of course, Academy Award-winning actress Mira Sorvino, was one of those who accused producer Harvey Weinstein of sexually assaulting and then blacklisting her. Sorvino did not mince words. He's going to go to jail. Oh yeah, that son of a b****. Good for him if he goes, because if not, he has to meet me, and I will kill that mother f***. Real simple. If I'd known it, he would not be walking. He'd be in a wheelchair. The pig will get his comeuppance, the law will get him, he's going to go to jail and die in jail. Along with the rest of his family, Sorvino was a lifelong horse lover and ran a horse-saving organisation. He also marketed a range of pasta sauces based on a recipe that his mother had given him. He was truly a jack of all trades, and he passed away this year at the age of 83. Number 9. William Knight. William Knight appeared in 2 episodes of the original series, first in The Naked Now and then later in The Trouble with Tribbles. He played the crewman Moody, who was affected by the Psi 2000 virus and was then seen running through the halls of the Enterprise attempting to serenade Yeoman Rand. He would later appear in one of the beta canon novels, Perry's Planet, in which he was given the first name of Wade. Knight had a long career as a voiceover actor, appearing in the original Ghost in the Shell in 1995. He also lent his voice to the film Akira. He was known for playing wise old men type characters. He also made dozens of appearances in live action as well, most recently in Ryan Murphy's Hollywood. He died this year in Los Angeles at 88 years of age. Number 8. Sally Kellerman. Sally Kellerman appeared in the 2nd pilot of Star Trek Where No Man Has Gone Before as Dr. Elizabeth Daner. She was, of course, the psychiatrist who was assigned to the Enterprise to study the effects of long-term space travel on the crew members. At this point in her career, she was receiving a lot of guest starring roles in various shows. Of course, Dr. Daner does not survive the events of that episode, so that was a little bit of a theme for what was going on with her at the time. She would then go on to appear in Robert Altman's MASH, where she played the role of Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan. She received an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress for this role, which would put her career on a slightly higher path. She would later speak about how at this point in her career, she was quite stubborn. She received a call from Altman one day where he said, "Do you want to be in my new film?" And she said, "Only if the part's good," and then Altman hung up on her. That part was in his film Nashville. It was a part that would have seen her be able to act and sing on screen, which was something she badly wanted, a missed opportunity that she later regretted. Thankfully, that was by no means the end for her. She continued to work steadily right through into the 2010s, including a role for which she was nominated for a Daytime Emmy for Best Guest Actress on the soap The Young and the Restless. She also then wrote her memoir in which she spoke about her relationship with her sister Diana. She was then slated to appear in a production that was called Mrs. Scrooge. It would be a version of A Christmas Carol, but actually the whole project was an allegory for the ongoing AIDS epidemic, which she felt was not receiving nearly enough media attention. Kellerman had 3 children, including Claire, who was actually her niece, who she adopted after her sister emigrated following her divorce. She and her husband, Jonathan Crane, adopted Jack, Donald and Hannah Vaughn in 1989. Kellerman died from heart failure at a care facility this year at the age of 84. Number 7, Marva Hicks. Marva Hicks was an American R&B singer who appeared as Tuvok's wife T'Pel in Star Trek Voyager. She released a self-titled album in 1991 via Polydor Records and appeared with many other artists. She was initially a gospel singer, and her track Never Been in Love Before is what really got her recognition early on in the charts. She would appear alongside Michael Jackson, taking the female solo part of I Just Can't Stop Loving You during the celebrations for the birthday of the Sultan of Brunei. She would appear in such shows as Sister Sister, Mad About You, and then she would also appear as the character of Principal Jakara in the show One Life to Live. She appeared on Babylon 5 as well in the episode And the Rock Cried Out, No Hiding Place. She played, fittingly, a singer, performing the track There's No Hiding Place Down Here. She passed away at 66 years of age. Number 6, Robert Brown. Robert Brown will be best remembered to Trekkies as the character of Lazarus, who appeared in the episode The Alternative Factor. He also played the alternate Lazarus in that episode as well. Now, it is very safe to say that reviews of this episode were not kind. However, there is a very big mitigating factor to that. Robert Brown had been, in fact, a friend of William Shatner, and was cast at literally the last minute as a replacement for the actor John Barrymore, father of Drew, who had just failed to show up for filming. So he was chucked into the role with 0 preparation time. Brown would also appear in some of the other biggest shows of the day, including Wagon Train. He has another connection with Star Trek, which I will admit is a little bit tangential. The episode Assignment Earth guest starred Robert Lansing as Gary Seven. Robert Lansing's real name was Robert Brown, but he couldn't use his real name because of the work our Robert Brown had done earlier. That name was then taken by the Screen Actors Guild, so we had to change it to Robert Lansing. Hollywood's strange. Robert Brown died at the age of 95 in Ojai, California. Number 5, Leslie Jordan. Leslie Jordan appeared in Star Trek Voyager playing a Ferengi, one of the 2 who had been stranded in the Delta Quadrant years earlier through the Barzan wormhole. Leslie Jordan was a hilarious actor who's probably best remembered for his role as Beverly in Will and Grace, who was the arch nemesis of Karen Walker. He's so funny. Everything he says contains so many homophobic sound bites, while he is clearly playing for the same team as both Will and Jack. But how dare you suggest such a thing? He's just my business associate, Benji. Jordan would of course later go on then to appear in so many other roles, and memorably he would do some guest spots in Ryan Murphy's American Horror Story as well. He was an actor, he was a writer, he was a musician, and when lockdown hit us all, he became quite funny on TikTok. He died at the age of 67 following a car crash, which was sadly caused by what coroners later believed was an undiagnosed medical condition. Number 4, Brad William Henke. Brad William Henke appeared in Star Trek 2009 but you didn't see him or hear him. He appeared in a deleted scene as the uncle of the young James T. Kirk. Now, in the theatrical release, that role was actually relegated to a vocal role only, which is when the uncle rings him on the old Nokia-type phone, but that was actually dubbed over by Greg Gunberg. So despite the fact that you didn't see or hear him, he was actually in Star Trek. In recent years, he also appeared as Desi Piscatella, the terrifying guard in Orange is the New Black, along with the recent CBS adaptation of Stephen King's The Stand, wherein he played Tom Collins. Before acting, he'd been a professional football player. He played for the Denver Broncos and Fort Worth Cavalry. In recent years, he faced several health conditions which required insertion of 2 stents and the removal of a tumour from his pancreas. He passed away at the age of 51, peacefully in his sleep. Number 3, Michael Braveheart. There is no way you don't recognize Michael Braveheart because he's been in just that many episodes of Star Trek. He appeared in something like 50 plus episodes of The Next Generation from the second season right up until the penultimate episode. Normally he would be wearing science blue, as he often worked in sickbay alongside Drs. Pulaski and Dr. Crusher. In fact, the call sheet sometimes referred to him as Dr. Death, although his official name was Crewman Martinez. Braveheart was of Indigenous American descent and had roles on Cagney and Lacey and Cheers. He also did a lot of promotional work for Paramount as well, sometimes appearing in full Klingon makeup and regalia at events. He would go on to appear in Star Trek's Deep Space Nine, Voyager and Enterprise, along with First Contact and Star Trek Insurrection. Braveheart suffered from ill health for the last few years of his life, including chronic congestive heart failure and arthritis, and unfortunately passed away at the age of 61. Number 2, Laurel Goodwin. Laurel Goodwin appeared as Yeoman Colt in the original pilot of Star Trek, The Cage. Colt was written as a love interest for Captain Pike. She would appear in The Cage and would then appear again in archive footage in The Menagerie, although Goodwin's contract was not continued from that original pilot into series. You see, as she had been a love interest for Captain Pike, the role was dialed down a little bit when more emphasis was put on Vina in that pilot. And because Jeffrey Hunter then elected not to return when it came to Where No Man Has Gone Before, Colt's character was just written out of the series. Goodwin would later recount a tale of how she got the part. She walked in, she read her lines, and Gene Roddenberry made a very big deal about how good her legs looked, and he wanted to see more. And so she unashamedly lifted her skirt and she turned around and he said that was brilliant. I love it. And she was cast on the spot, and so naturally her character wore trousers for the entire episode. Prior to this, she'd been acting for some time, and she actually appeared as the love interest to Elvis Presley in the film Girls, Girls, Girls. She also knew Leonard Nimoy quite well, as she had paid to attend some of his acting classes and was delighted to find out that he was also cast in Star Trek. She retired from acting in 1971, and she changed careers at this point. She moved then towards getting as qualified as she possibly could in the area of nursing. This would sadly become a skill that would help her as she was caring for her husband in the last few years of his life. She eventually started attending Star Trek conventions, and she laughed in an interview to StarTrek.com that she loved everything about them, except getting to and around them because they were normally so big. She passed away this year at the age of 79. Her sister Maureen said that if she met you, and if she liked you, there was no middle ground. You weren't just friends, you were family. Number 1, Louise Fletcher. Louise Fletcher, of course, played Kai Wynn, one of the greatest villains in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, or in fact the Star Trek franchise. She appears at the end of the first season and goes all the way through to the finale, and it's so rare that you actually see Kai Wynn openly scheming. She's just that good that she manages to walk that fine line. She is a character you love to hate. Louise Fletcher was an Academy Award-winning actress, winning Best Actress for her role as Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, for which she also won a BAFTA and a Golden Globe. During her acceptance speech, she demonstrated her aptitude for American Sign Language. Both of her parents were deaf and worked extensively with the hearing impaired. Her father, Reverend Robert Capers Fletcher, founded more than 40 churches for the deaf in their home state of Alabama. She based her performance on the way she saw people of colour being treated by white people in her home state. She was cast by Milos Forman after he saw her performance in Thieves, which she actually only got in a slightly ironic twist, as she had been dropped from Robert Altman's Nashville due to a falling out with Altman himself. She would continue working in film and television for years, including a recent turn on Shameless, where she played a hard-drinking and straight-talking character. She passed away peacefully in her sleep in her home in France at the age of 88. Thank you so much everyone for watching this list. We know it has been one of our longer ones, so thank you so much for sticking with it. Everyone, look after yourselves. Be kind to yourselves, be kind to friends and family. Live long and prosper. We'll see you in 2023. Thanks very much.